first. Hi everyone, GM. My name's Harry. I manage the developer advocate team at Chainlink Labs. Been there for about 2.5 years. I love it and very excited to talk about the Golden Age of DeFi. I think DeFi is something I'm very closely aligned with in terms of its values and what potential it has for society. And I think probably we're at still at the experimental stage of DeFi. And I think there's going to be a lot more things to come in the future.
Hi everyone, my name is Anton Bukov. I'm co-founder of OneAge. I believe that Golden Age of DeFi could mean that we are currently see the most innovative part of this DeFi. I believe that probably most innovations will come in like 5-10 years, maybe less. And I mean, it's similar to what happened on traditional finance. Most of the things were invented like tens of years ago, and very few things appeared in recent years. So probably golden age of centralized finance was when all those things were invented.
Hello everyone, I'm Francesco. I'm the founder of Superfluid, the protocol for money streaming. Very excited to be here. The Golden Age of DeFi, I love talking about DeFi. I think it's been great seeing everyone here do amazing stuff over the years. In my opinion, we're nowhere near the Golden Age of DeFi yet, but I am starting to see some signs that I think are exciting. For me, as long as we're kind of trading dog tokens back and forth, it's still kind of the kind of casino times when we will start, actually helping businesses, close cash flow gaps and, help people borrow against their salaries and manage their personal finances. Then I think we will be in kind of actually fulfilling the mission. For now, I feel like we're still building the infrastructure and playing around, but it's still a lot of fun.
Hey, I'm Shrikar, part of Cointelegraph, currently head of engineering here. The golden age of DeFi, I think mostly learning about France saying that it's mostly we are at the building phase and probably it's step 1 or step 2 or step 0 probably at the building phase of it. So super excited to look at all the things there. Very much about it. Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. So securing the future of DeFi is the sub-headline, and I want to focus a little bit on security because in decentralized finance, especially in the last 2 years, this has been like a big focus. We've seen rug pull after hack after rug pull. And like people, especially like retail users are concerned. They think that crypto is a scam and they could lose all their funds. And in some ways they're not wrong. So I wanted to ask the panelists, like, what are the main learnings from the last years? And like, what can we do to ensure that that the future of DeFi is much more secure and friendly to people keeping their funds and their life savings?
Okay, I can be first, yeah. So, in the past, I saw there is a huge room and opportunities for accounting conventions in DeFi, but in recent months, I also came up to the idea that there is a chance and a high room for innovation in security primitives in DeFi. So, this means that whenever you came up to idea how you could achieve something what is already on the market, but in a more secure way, it can have less risks for users, or like anyway kind of better conditions for them, it's innovation. And if you can came up something better what already exists and it's more secure, it's innovation in security. But for sure, you could innovate in accounting, but your security could be worse than it was. But anyway, it's innovation. So there is room to innovate in multiple dimensions of DeFi. Yeah. So, for example, I yesterday had a not panel, it was a presentation on main stage. I showed the concept which we recently came up to. It was called token plugins. And this concept allows to have arbitrary functionality extension for tokens for those users who want to opt in. Users can plug into on-chain plugins and their balances changes of some specific token will be handled and checked by on-chain plugin. And these plugins could be effectively farms, and people can do multi-farming. They can participate in farms deployed by arbitrary people, arbitrary projects. It's permissionless and it's risk-free. You don't need anymore to deposit your assets to the farm, and you don't need to have audit of this farm. So you can plug into many farms, no risks. It's permissionless. It's security innovation. In terms of accounting, it's the same as previous farms, but in terms of security, it's innovation.
Let me drill into that a little bit because I find that fascinating. So the idea here is that I don't give access to my funds to a farm like I do now.
Yes, you will still have your tokens on your balance. So these tokens, they need to support this ERC20 plugins extensions, where we're gonna push it to Open Zeppelin library because it's just great general extension of ERC20. It makes almost no sense and no downsides not to have it. And yeah, you still have your tokens on your balance, and there is farms which keep tracks of changes of your balance, and they can incentivize you to have this token on your balance. These tokens can be liquidity shares, LP tokens. This can be collateral tokens of money markets. This can be debt tokens of money markets. This can be anything else. And participation in this ERC20 entity can be incentivized permissionlessly and risk-free.
Mm-hmm. What do the other panelists think? I mean, this seems like a very different type of model where the user ultimately never lets go of their funds, and I think that's kind of very aligned with the ethos of crypto, where it's all about like self-sovereignty. Any challenges that you can think coming up there?
I think after 4 years in crypto, I'm incredibly skeptical of the words no risk. Obviously, I mean, I can't refute it because I have no idea what you're proposing. I haven't sort of checked it, but yeah, no risk.
For sure.
Those are scary words. But yeah, I mean, I agree that there's a lot of different approaches to things, and I think we're just scratching the surface. And for anyone who's been in the space for long enough, you know that we've come a long way in terms of smart contract security. I mean, you know, a few years ago, actually the first time I heard Anton's name was because he was going to audit our first contract, RDI. I don't know if you remember. You were going to audit it. That was before 1 inch.
Which contract?
RDI in 2019.
Yeah.
It's a few years ago. But anyway, you know, at the time there were like 4 people who were auditors. It was, you know, a much smaller space. Now there's hundreds of auditors, you know, going around selling their services at the conference. The tooling is much better. The standards are much more advanced, right? I mean, if you look at ERC20 and you look at things like ERC6 I mean, they're way more complicated, right? They allow for a lot more things, and with those standards, we're getting closer to secure best practices, right? And I think that's the ultimate goal. But at the same time, I wouldn't, you know, delude ourselves. It's always going to be full of risks because we are at the frontier of what we're doing, right? Like we're building stuff that's never been built before. We're creating new financial primitives. If there weren't risks, there wouldn't be rewards, and there's going to always be risks. Like there's no way you can build something for the first time and it doesn't break, and it's still interesting. Like you can build boring stuff that's not risky, right? But it's very hard to build something interesting. And I think that's just how it is.
Yeah, let me shortly comment. Yeah, I genuinely agree. Yeah, and I would only add that yeah, for sure, any profits, they mean that you have to take some risks. And initially, the idea of all incentivization was that you have risk already included in holding this asset. If it's LP, you have a risk of these losses related to your liquidity provided into some protocol. The idea of reducing risk was of those things which I told, like farms and token plugins, is that farms, they are introducing new risk. If you are farming, you are depositing your token into farm, and this farm have to be audited, else they can just steal your LP tokens. It's new risk for user, I agree. And yeah, you were correct when you said risk-free is a very strong word. I agree. There are risks, even in token plugins, there is risk that this plugin can be malicious and it can stuck and can have bug. But yeah, these risks are limited. In the worst case, what would happen, it can eat 200,000 of your gas for doing nothing. That's true, yeah. But we call it risk-free because your exposure to this risk is strictly limited to gas spendings, not related to amount of funds you are playing with in this liquidity provision or anything. Yeah. So in generally, I agree.
Any other ideas of like how we can make sure that customers can limit or at least like size the risk? Because I tend to agree with Francesco here that like we're playing with these, or playing actually, it's kind of a game, but like there's real value at stake, there's lives at stake here, like financially or livelihoods is probably the better word. Like how can we make sure that users can kind of size the risk to their appetite?
Good question.
Probably, let me try. Probably we could try to educate users more about risks they're getting, because I'm pretty sure most of the users, they do not recognize all of the risks they're stepping into by using DeFi protocols. Especially like the core feature of all the DeFi is composability. And some of the protocols, they compose in such a manner which increases number of risks. They just compounding risks of those protocols. But it's never usually, it's not always, it depends. For example, when aggregators, DEX aggregators do DEX aggregation, they do not expose users to risks of using other DEXs, even non-audited DEXs, like yesterday period DEXs or something like that. They protect users by having own smart contract which is audited, so they do not expose users to all those risks. But a lot of protocols like yield aggregators, there's no probably any way to non-expose users to risks of other protocols which are being used under the hood. So I believe educating users about their risks, number of risks, the potential amounts of risks. Some of risks are limited to gas costs. Some of risks are non-capped. They could be up to hold your deposit or something. I am not sure if there are any risks more than 100%, but they exist in centralized finance. If you will play with leverage on centralized exchange, you could end up with owing a lot of money to the centralized exchange. You will have negative balance and they will follow you until you will pay them. So I hope we don't have this in DeFi, and hopefully we will not see it.
Maybe a couple of things I've thought of. One is that unfortunately we're most likely going to become increasingly dependent on UIs to keep us safe. And I think one example that I like to bring up is Uniswap V4, right? Amazing innovation, blah blah blah. They're adding hooks. What that means is that now you can't use Uniswap anymore if you're a noob without trusting the interface, because you're gonna get robbed. Like effectively, the contract can do anything. Like before, you went to Uniswap, you swapped. You sent A, you got B. Now you send money to A, arbitrary logic executes, who knows what happens, right? And the result of that is obviously it's going to be a ton of financial innovations. It's going to be incredibly exciting for people like us who can go into weeds and understand this stuff and think of new financial designs. But for new users, it just means they have to use a trusted UI so that they know that they're interacting with pools that are not going to run them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a solution to this that goes beyond just trusting the UI. I hope so, but at the moment I don't see it.
I have opinion on this. I believe that usage of Uniswap pools directly was not possible since probably V2. I mean, there is no any way for user to use these pool smart contracts directly because it suspects that you will have multiple interactions within one transaction, and it's only possible via router contract. And these additional contracts, they could limit risks and exposure of user to this risk. For example, if you are swapping on arbitrary pool of Uniswap v4 with arbitrary hooks, there is a high chance that they could slip you to like 90% or something. But if you are using it via other contract, which is their router or any other router, 1-inch router, any other, you will be able to leverage these risks by the checks which can be done on this smart contract side. So it can check that your result is not, you would end up with a resulting token not less than some specific argument. So it can protect you, and I believe that V4 is probably at the same level as V3 if you are using it or not directly. But yes, if you are an engineer who is using pools directly, you have to see that there is a new room for abuse potential.
Yeah. I think it's just going back to the point about protecting users. I think it's about trust minimization. So trying to minimize trust, UI level, the protocol itself, the infrastructure, trying to keep that as trust minimized as possible. And very importantly, we need to learn from our lessons, I think, because I see a lot of exploits and vulnerabilities and things that have happened before, right? So collectively as an industry, we need to acknowledge that something bad has happened, figure out why it happened, what we should do, and then everyone should make sure that it doesn't happen again. I'm probably going to show my age here, but who here, there was a really big security issue or hack or potential bug that was around in the late 90s. Does anyone know what it was? Y2K. So what happened with Y2K? Everyone was like, holy crap, all of our databases have 2 numbers for dates and everything is going to break at the end of the century. We're going to have planes falling out the sky, toasters are going to be killing people and all that kind of stuff. But what happened collectively as the whole IT industry around the world said, okay, here's what we need to do to fix this. Everyone fixed it, and Y2K ended up being the biggest nothing burger of all time. It was a total non-event and everything was fine. And that's a good example of everyone realizing, hey, this bad thing happened. Here's what we should do, not just now, but in the future as well, to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. I think if we did that today, we wouldn't be seeing things like re-entrancy attacks and all those things that we've seen multiple times happening.
Can we add shortly about re-entrancies? I have a good example, you know. There is still a room for using re-entrancy for good, but it's
That's interesting.
That's small, yeah. For example, when we did limit order protocol at 1-inch, we did one specific thing, which, like, if you would look at Fusion, it works on top of limit order protocol, and how it works that users place limit orders, which are effectively Dutch auctions, and when arbitrage traders who are actually like resolvers in this system, whenever they see that price is good enough for them to fill, they could pick up a lot of orders and fill them. And it makes a lot of sense to fill a lot of orders simultaneously, not one by one, because you could have mutual filling those orders, at least partially. And we, in our limit order protocol, don't have function to fill multiple orders. But we can do this via reentrancy. We have taker interaction. When you call fill method with taker interaction, it will forward you maker assets. Maker is those who created order. Then it will call you back, so you will be able to do something with those funds, and then you will end your interaction, and protocol will transfer from funds from you to maker, to those who did the order. So what we have done in our Fusion smart contract, we fill first order, get a callback, filling next order, getting its callback, and then we're filling next order. So we can fill multiple orders via reentrancy. It was done intentionally, and it's kind of trick which allowed us to have ultimate gas efficiency. We do not work with any arrays of orders or arrays of values or anything like this. Arrays of signatures is even more horrifying in terms of gas usage and solidity. So there is probably one of few applications for reentrancy for good.
I think like one thing that came to mind via the UI portion is like if I get into a modern car, let's say like I buy like a brand new 5 Series BMW, there's actually like a ton of UI that makes it even possible to drive the car. If I would like turn it all off, like I couldn't get anywhere with the car. The steering is powered, the brakes are powered, the gas is probably by wire. So it almost seems like this is just the nature of technology. At some point it gets so powerful and complicated that you need additional technology to make the technology work. And that's, I think, like just from a systems perspective, that's what you see. It's called like the intervention spiral. So like you have interventions on top of interventions on top of interventions. And here we come like, I think with security, the thing is like, how do you manage the complexity that's introduced? And that's something that's very interesting to me. Do you think there's just going to be ongoing abstraction like we've seen in regular computer science, where like the first guys did holes into punch cards and then assembly was created and then top level programming languages, and maybe that's going to happen for DeFi, or do you think that people are just going to like not increase complexity at some point?
I don't think there is a point where you cannot stop complexity, right? If you want sophistication, complexity would come, right? I think, drawing back to the analogy of education, right? Can we push for multi-sig instead of EOAs, right? That would be one thing, okay. Then can I put Zodiac from Safe, which is a sort of an access control, right? I think that makes sense. And removing a lot of manual process should, of course, brings in complexity, but should solve for some of the security problems. One thing you can think of is UMA's post-snap protocol. It automatically executes from snapshot, so there is no manual intervention, right? And there is some access control involved. There is some delegated authority that can so this is the scope that I would want to execute it, and this can also apply for governance as well, right? I know people now had a social engineering attack where there was I think around 70 or 20 or 80, again because it was manually executed from an Excel sheet, right? And if you want to bring in a process that is auditable, that is on-chain, something like Zodiac, of course you build abstractions on abstractions. So can't see it going away, but probably like good software engineering should solve for it.
Yeah. Let me first provide a quote which is referring to what you said previously. Björn Starstrup, founder of C++ language, he said 20-something years ago that he wished that using computer will not be more complex than using his mobile phone. He said that his dream come true. He don't even know all functions of his phone. So it's like shooting from other side a little bit. And yeah, regarding the dealing with complexity, I believe that complexity is the thing which is killing more projects than any other thing in general in software engineering. And dealing with complexity on smart contract level is requiring like a lot of experience and skills of software engineering in general. What we are doing at 1inch, we believe that we are looking for kind of, we're trying to equilibrate between compactness of code and its gas efficiency. And one more thing which can be done on top, but without any trade-offs, is number of security audits. If you have 5,000 lines of code protocol with few audits, it's few magnitudes less safer if you would have the same functionality implemented in 500 lines of code and having 10 audits, for sure. And when I talk about lines of code, it doesn't mean that we should put everything in one line. There should be more straightforward changes which require you to do less things, to do only what is necessary and not do what's not necessary.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point, and like I want to kind of shift lanes here because I think we talked about like the technical side of security, and I think that's obviously like a really important aspect. But there's also like a human side of complexity of security, and as long as I have people who follow some crypto Twitter influencer who says like, this is my 2000% yield strategy, and then it's like 55 DeFi legals in a row, people are gonna get hurt somewhere along the road. So I think like, how do you, from like a builder perspective, think about ways to mitigate that like human side of ensuring that people, I mean, I think you can't out innovate stupidity, but like how can you make sure that the users are kind of like informed and that human side is kind of handled?
I can say it shortly, and then you will say maybe something smart thing, because I would kind of joke. I would say that those people who do this, they are buying their experience. We hope that more people will find a way to get this experience without paying that high cost for it. They will not pay a whole deposit. So yeah, but that's the way how people buy their experience. They will probably lose one or few deposits until they will realize what is safe and what is not. But it's kind of joke and non-joke. Maybe you have serious opinion?
No, I think I was going to say there's a reason we call DeFi users degens, right? Like, these are not normal people, right? They're not doing normal things. And there is simply, to be honest, I mean, again, having been in DeFi for a long time, I would have a really hard time enumerating the risks of any single kind of, let's say, DeFi, like the newer generation of DeFi products, because they're so layered. It's impossible, right? Like, even something as simple as a stablecoin now has, 65 layers of risk across what assets they use as collateral, what contracts they use, what front ends they use, where they're integrated, what oracles they use, all sorts of stuff, right? Like, it's impossible to keep track of all of this. There's, I think, two mental approaches you can have. One is to simply assume that everybody is doing their best effort to keep this stuff safe, right? Which I think is the way we all survive as society, right? It's just thinking, not everyone is out there to kill me, right? In the same way, in DeFi, you're like, not everyone is out there to scam me, and most people are out there to avoid problems, right? Because otherwise you never trust Chainlink, right? Like, to trust, literally, when you use Chainlink, you're saying, Chainlink is not going to rug pull, right? Because they have way more to lose than they have to, right? Yeah. And ultimately, that is the kind of game theory that keeps the whole space from being really full of scams, because it could be much worse, right? It's actually, I'm actually fairly confident if I go on Uniswap and I swap a token, I'll get the other token. And if you think about it, from a traditional finance point of view, I'm kind of touching, 100 layers of unregulated stuff. And yet it all works, right? And that is game theory, because it's simply that none of the people involved actually want to scam you, because it's in their interest to provide you something that doesn't break, right? That said, I think we'll never really get rid of risk, and this stuff is risky. We are at the frontier of finance. We are building crazy shit. And there's a reason we call our party that degen, and we go there and we're happy about being called degens, because we know we're taking on risk, and we hope that we will reap the rewards before this all goes mainstream and becomes boring, right? Which is inevitably going to happen. It's starting to happen with some of the products. NFTs are objectively boring. You just minted them and then you had an NFT, right? DeFi is not like that. It's still fun, it's still exciting, but that excitement comes from the risk and the complexity. The moment all the risk and complexity are abstracted, it's not going to be fun anymore, at least for me.
Yeah, agreed. I think looking at the long term, people are not everyone's going to want to be a degen. People are just going to have a place where they can put their money and earn a stable yield that's better than what a bank or something can give them. And we just kind of need to work towards a world where if you want to be a degen and work with 100 layers of complexity and try to understand them and do things with them, that's fine. But then we also have to have the world where your grandmother or grandfather or auntie or uncle can put their money into Aave or somewhere and go, cool, I'm going to earn 8% on this over the next year or so.
I think it's also on us to enforce guardrails. I know now we are regions, but when we want that sort of retail adoption at scale, I think it's also on us to set up forced guardrails. Like one of the things that you can see is, okay, your banking by default enforces two-factor authentication, or at least it suggests you to do it. Can we do it? Like, I know transaction simulation is one thing that most people are looking at now. Like, can I sort of, is this guardrail implemented for all of the popular front ends that are going to be available, right? Can I enforce so that people learn the scale of security? Right? Can I teach them, like forcing them to do it is one thing that I can see work.
Awesome, thanks. So we're coming up on time here. I just want to give every participant to close out with a sentence or two. And I would love to come back to the golden age of DeFi and how we're going to get there. So something upbeat, optimistic about our future in decentralized finance.
Okay, I'll start first again. So I believe that degens are kind of engine of the DeFi. They are always on the frontier. They close eyes on all the risks and step into the new things, new inventions, new protocols. Not all of them are sustainable, but yeah, these guys are checking this on their own skin. You know, it's impossible to test some new things out and prove if they are working or not on testnets without involving any value. I would say even blockchains, even as large blockchains as Ethereum is, are still could be considered as experimental software, and we are all kind of degens here. But there are some guys who are more degens than other degens. They are on the frontier of these DeFi protocols, and they are doing a good job for innovations. And they are those who do a value and time proof of new technologies. And that's interesting concept.
Cool. Okay, I'll go next, I guess. I think we're still at a very early stage of DeFi, like we've been saying. It's still an experiment, just like an inkling, a test. But I think it's proved to be, in my opinion, the best use of Web3 technology so far. And it's shown a promise that we can do finance with each other in a better way, a strictly better way than the way we do today, right? Because the technology gives unique properties that the traditional finance world just can't provide. So I think we have a few hurdles to get over in terms of rugs and hacks, and 6% of DeFi TVL has been stolen, and 2 billion in bridge hacks and all that kind of stuff, and regulation. But I think the ship has sailed in terms of we've shown what's possible. The world is starting to take notice. Banks are starting to take notice, clearinghouses, companies like Swift, etc. So I think it's going to be inevitable. It's just a case of getting past some of these issues and headwinds, and I think the future is going to be very bright, where everyone will be using DeFi or some kind of version of on-chain finance.
I like that. That's really optimistic. I would agree that we should cherish degens who try all the weird stuff that we built, and hopefully we will keep building weird stuff and not be, hamstrung by regulation. I think if you think about it, it's incredible. I mean, we built in 3 years, if you look back, a full financial system with thousands of participants, fully global, pretty scalable, moving a ton of money, and you can go to 100 different websites and have safe interactions, and none of these companies are regulated. Like, we've proven that you can build a financial system that's built on actual security and not kind of certificates and licenses. And I think that's an incredible achievement. And I think and hope that going forward we'll encroach more on the kind of financial life of real people and businesses. I think for now we're still kind of, we're degens, we're giving the apes some bananas to trade around, and it's all fun games, and it's great, but we haven't yet made a dent on real people and real businesses. And that, I think, is going to be the next stage, right? When we see businesses come to take their loans on chain and are not just talking, that happens, obviously, with things like Maple Finance, but the people taking loans on chain are hedge funds taking loans to trade on CeFi, right? So it's still not quite there, right? The moment we can have real businesses getting real loans on chain, people earning real money on chain, people getting loans against the money they earn on chain, all of these things, then we're providing real value to real people beyond degens. But it will all be thanks to the degens who tested this stuff out before then. So, you know, keep going out there, keep losing money. It's for a good reason, so for a good cause.
I think pretty much summarized it, but I think, like you said, I think adoption is something that I'm also looking forward to keep, right? Because all the deal stuff is cool, but a lot of these things also have to be scaled, and I'm looking at scaling standpoint, right? Okay, what can we do better, right? One of the things that I see also that's not security is probably because DeFi is so new and nobody understands it in terms of, okay, how do I calculate my P&L for revenue swap before? I don't know, right? I spent 6 months on DeFi and I still don't know. It's probably better observability on how to get there, probably is a reduction of barrier for adoption to come, right? I think that's one thing that I look forward to. And I think once adoption comes in, once you have the pivot, a lot of these things will change really quickly. So super excited to see what's happening.
Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you so much for coming. A final closing word, and thank you all for attending.
Excuse me, I will be short. Let me add one more thought. You see, this DeFi, it's have a lot of risks. Like, why we hear about all these risks? We had traditional finance, and we did not hear about most of those risks. That's not because they are not exist. That's because these risks in TradFi, they are not transparent. You can't understand and realize most of those risks because this is mostly private companies and you can't know what technologies they use, where do they store values, what is their baskets and all these things. But the best part of DeFi in terms of risks is that most of the risks introduced on DeFi level can be audited. I mean, we can observe, see, understand those risks. Those who are curious, they can see, enumerate, and do something with those risks. They could buy insurance to cover some risks. They could leverage it. And I believe this is much better approach than any TradFi where risks are unclear and non-transparent.
I think that's a good way to sum it up. Risk is everywhere, either you are aware of it or not. So get educated, get out there, lose money, have fun. Thank you all.